Hi YouTube, welcome to another guide for Black Desert Online, and this one has been a long time coming, a guide on how to play Awakening Wizard in PvP. Before we get into it, I just wanted to mention that everything in this guide, and honestly any class guide, is not necessarily fact. There are many playstyles to classes within BDO, and what I've compiled here is simply the conclusions I've arrived at after about 5 years of experience playing Awakening Wizard in all forms of PvP. In this guide, we will go over gear to use in both DR and Evasion builds, skill enhancement selection, core skill selection, capped add-ons, uncapped add-ons, combos of all types, and lastly, a comprehensive guide on how to properly PvP using all of this information. As always, there are timestamps in the description and on the timeline below, so feel free to use those to click around to the parts you are most interested in seeing. Without further ado though, let's get into it. First up is the gear setup I recommend for Awakening Wizard. Wizard is one of the classes that can build towards either evasion or damage reduction, also known as DR. A DR build will have higher AP, be tankier in PvE, and synergize with Awakened Wizard's DR boosted super armor. If you don't know what DR boosted super armor is, it will be covered later. An evasion build will be less tanky in PvE, have less AP, but in return will feel more tanky than DR due to accuracy being a less common stat. It will also synergize better with your class buff, also known as your E buff, which would be Controlled Madness, which grants you a 12% boost to your all evasion rate. All stats discussed in this segment will be with buffs on, including buffs from add-ons. If you want to know what buffs are used in the calculations, this is what I use. It's a pretty standard setup. The only thing not shown here is the plus 20 all DP from add-ons. And first up, we will go over the DR gear setup, which is also the build I choose to use and feel works best. DR is split into 3 breaking points: 550 DR, 600 DR, and 650 DR. At 550 DR, you will start to feel the tankiness. At 600, you will start to survive combos and feel tanky in ball fights. This is also the amount of DR most DR builds aim for at the moment for hard cap status. And lastly, at 650, you will feel extremely tanky and survive most things that aren't an entire ball wailing on you at once. This is basically DP meme status DR at this point. As for what gear to use for this setup, this is the gear I'm currently running, and it is still very much a work in progress. The main things to take note of are the 2 narcs, which are essential for DR, the use of a maneuver, which is the only sub-weapon you should ever use as a DR player, and the Mind Focus Lightstone set, which is extremely important for Wizard in general, no matter which spec you're playing, and I'll explain why that is later on. Just know that this Lightstone set is best in slot for Awakened Wizard in PvP. With this setup on that you just saw, I have a 551 DR when fully buffed, so we've hit that 550 bracket. Next up, I want to show you the DR setup I recommend going for as your end game hard cap goal. This is what I'm aiming for. The main difference you see here is that the armor is now full Tet Fallen God, and there's the addition of a Pen Kadja ring for even more DR. The HP artifacts are also now Kabuas, as they are essentially the same as an HP artifact with just more health on it. This setup also makes use of triple pen devos, which will give you a set bonus to further boost damage lost from the Kadri. If you don't know what the set bonus is, it gives you an extra 12 hidden AP. With this endgame setup, we end up at 607 DR when full buffs, while still retaining over 700 total AP. This will make you feel fairly tanky and still do plenty of damage. In addition, for the purpose of capped content in the DR setup, you should swap out some gear to optimize, as you see on screen here. All you really do is swap out necklace and the 2 earrings for a Kaya necklace and 2 Chimera earrings. This is to gain more special attack damage to get around the stat caps and capped content. All of these accessories can be bought from the NPC Mandolph, who's located here next to the Trent Storage Keeper. As for crystals, I use these for capped and uncapped content as labeled on the screen. There isn't really much to explain when it comes to these crystals. Most of them are pretty standard for DR and focus on that stat, except in capped content, in which we focus more on health. Up next, we'll start going over the Evasion build, and I specifically do not use Evasion, so I don't have much experience with it, but I will still go over an endgame Evasion setup explained to and shared with me by a fellow well-known Awakened Wizard, Kosini, if anyone's heard of him. I would like to thank him for talking with me and teaching me about his setup so I can include it in this guide. And I'll bring it up on screen. You can see how to build Evasion for both capped and uncapped content. You will notice you don't need the Debo set for Evasion, as you get more AP out of distos and don't care about the DR loss. On the capped setup, you can see it shares the same swaps as DR, with those accessories being swapped in the same way, and the Lightstone set for everything is once again mind focused for all the setups, which further shows how strong that set is on Wizard. With the gear setup out of the way now, we can move on to choosing your skill enhancement, which are also known as RABAM skills. For the first skill, you get to choose between Sage's Light and Sage's Rage, and between these two, Sage's Light is the best choice for all forms of PvP that are not 1v1. The speed and amount healed is absolutely fight winning in PvP from Sage's Light. It is, however, okay to take Sage's Rage in 1v1 situations specifically, but even then, I personally would highly recommend Sage's Light in 1v1s, as in my opinion, the heal outweighs the extra CC and damage that Sage's Rage brings by a lot. The second skill gives you a choice between Swift Earthquake and Trebling Thunder. The choice here is really no contest. Swift Earthquake is the best option in PvP. The super armor on this skill is much better than the slow, unprotected CC the other option gives. Once again, however, specifically in 1v1 situations, if you really value the CC, you can take Trebling Thunder in 1v1s, as in that form of PvP, it is easier to manage not getting CC'd in the animation. But in anything else, it's no contest. You should be using Swift Earthquake. The third skill gives you a choice between Lightning Spear and Mana Arrows. Of all the RABAMs, this is honestly the least impactful, so the decision doesn't matter too much. It's really more up to your opinion. If you do want my recommendation, however, I prefer going with Lightning Spear, as it is a ranged skill with a relatively quick animation and decent damage. I feel like Mana Arrows doesn't do much and is only really used for forward guard, which I feel isn't really needed, as you have enough in the rest of your kit. Next up, with skill enhancement done, we will start to go over our core skill selection. Of all the options available, only 2 are really worth choosing on Awakened Wizard. And those 2 choices are between Core Water Sphere and Core Bolide of Destruction. I personally choose to use Bolide of Destruction because I like having the extra SA knockdown, which allows for what are, in my opinion, safer and higher damaging combos. Water Sphere, however, is okay to choose as well. The forward guard it gives adds another protected ranged catch if you like to rely on those types of catches. But I still feel that Bolide is the better option, as it makes comboing much easier and gives you a very powerful tool to use in all forms of PvP. Another thing I'd like to go over before getting into actual gameplay of the Awakened Wizard class is a weird quirk that happens with your main hand skills, specifically in the Awakening Wizard spec. In PvP, if you aren't aware, most skills have a reduction in how much damage they do in PvP, whose amount is listed in the skill description for each skill. For whatever reason, most of Wizard's main hand skills, if you unlevel them so that they are 1 level below the absolute version, they don't have any damage reduction on them at all. If we math out the damage, it can be seen that if you do this, your main hand skills in Awakening will actually do way more damage if you unlevel them than if they were maxed out. For example, If we look at Absolute Meteor, we can see that it does 1,465% damage times 4 on the first hit and 1,600% times 4 on the second. But with the 40% damage reduction in place, that gets reduced to 879% and 960% respectively. If we then look at one level down, so that would be Meteor 3, we can see the damage is 1,227% times 4 and 1,334 times 4. And you can see on the skill description, there is no damage reduction on this skill. This means that by unleveling this skill, you will get a close to 30% damage increase. Another example is Fireball Explosion, whose absolute version does 1,192% times 5, with a 44% damage reduction in PvP, which leaves us with a final damage value of 668% in PvP. Once again, if we bring that skill one level down to Fireball Explosion 3, the skill's damage is 1,000% times 5, which is similarly also around a 30% increase in damage. This quirk is true for many more skills on Awakening Wizard, and as a result, it is pretty much required for you to de-level the relevant skills to one level below Absolute if you want to be as strong as possible. The skills, if you want to know, that you need to unlevel are as follows: Fireball, Fireball Explosion, Meteor, Lightning Storm, Lightning, Residual Lightning, Earthquake, and Blizzard. When you do this, there are 3 additional things to take note of. First is that you'll be taking Ultimate Blizzard, which still has a reduced damage effect, but if you math it out, you will see that the Ultimate version amongst all the versions is the one that will still deal the most, so make sure you grab Ultimate for Blizzard. The second thing is that when unleveling Earthquake and Meteor, both of their cooldowns will increase significantly. So keep that in mind, because it might screw up your internal cooldown clock and you will accidentally press the skills when they're not ready. I also think that it is okay, however, to leave Earthquake at Absolute if you choose, because I find it much more useful as a catch than for damage, and a lower cooldown is more beneficial for that type of use. The last thing with this quirk is that when you unlevel Meteor, it gains a very strong effect, which is it becomes super armor, which makes it a fully protected skill, because usually the skill is only forward guard during the channel and then it's unprotected at the end. I don't know why this is a thing for Awakened Wizard, and it may change in the future and invalidate this information, but it is very important to know this weird trick for your main hand skills. The last thing to go over before getting into gameplay is add-on selection. Add-ons, in my opinion, work best when you select them by yourself, as the way add-ons end up functioning is they supplement your playstyle specifically. So when you copy someone else's add-ons, if you don't use the skills in the same way and in the same situations that they do, you will not get the full effect out of them. If you want help selecting your add-ons, I do have a video guide on my channel to help teach you how to choose them, but if you do want to use my add-ons even after that disclaimer, this is what I use in uncapped PvP. Aqua Jail is used mainly to trade and at the end of combos, so I put slows on it, which stacks with the slow it has by default. Cataclysm is used as an engage tool and catch, so placing DP reduction effects facilitates more damage as it is a skill thrown out often. Hellfire is very similar in use to Cataclysm, and I instead opt for a damage boost as it stacks with the boost the skill has built in. Bolide is used mainly as a re-CC in combos, so I give it add-ons that boost my damage. And for Magma Bomb and Barrage of Water, both of these skills are almost always used on cooldown, so I opt for a bleed on the opponent on Magma Bomb and attack speed and DP boost on Barrage of Water, because with how low of a cooldown both of those skills are, these buffs will basically have a 100% uptime. As for capped add-ons, there isn't much to go over. It is pretty much the same, except you swap out any non-percentage stat boosts for percentage stat boosts. This is because flat increases or decreases in stats do not work 99% of the time in capped content due to being overcapped, and by picking things like crit rate or crit damage, you can work around those limits. Now we can finally get into some combos. There are many more combo routes that exist beyond these, but these are the good ones to start off learning that will always be relevant. All of the following combos will have on-screen examples as I talk about them as well, so be sure to take advantage of that. The first combo we will be going over is your super armor rotation. This combo's purpose is not to deal damage, but to keep you in super armor permanently, so you cannot get caught by a flank class diving you. It will most commonly be used in between combat situations when you're just idling, waiting for the next shot call or fight to happen. The combo is Cataclysm, followed by Aqua Jail, followed by Magical Evasion, followed by either Summoning Marge or Summoning Arn, depending on which one is off cooldown. If you linger all of these skills as long as possible to extend the super armor on them, as seen on screen, you'll be able to endlessly stay in super armor as long as you want. The next combo is your 1v1 grab combo. This is, as the title suggests, a combo to be done off of a grab, and it is as follows. Flame Knot, which is your grab, into Flames Calling, followed by Lava Field, followed by Water Sphere, into Hellfire, then Bolide of Destruction, Magma Bomb, into Barrage of Water, and ending with Aqua Jail. Up next is going to be what I consider to be the bread and butter 1v1 combo for Awakened Wizard. This combo will work off of any stiff, or if you catch your opponent with the first skill of the combo itself, which is Hellfire. The combo is Hellfire into Magma Bomb into Core Bolide of Destruction. If you did not take Core Bolide and instead opted for Water Sphere, you replace this skill with Core Water Sphere at this point. From here, you go into Barrage of Water, Cataclysm, Aqua Jail, and then end in Chilling Wave. There is one thing to note about this combo, and that is that the Chilling Wave at the end is optional. That is because the opponent will get up from the CCs in the middle of the Chilling Wave animation, and as seen in this example on screen, if you are not prepared to cancel it or mouse move it, you may get CC'd and caught out of that last Chilling Wave. So the combo technically ends with Aqua Jail, and Chilling Wave is an option you can use at your own risk for a little extra damage at the end if they didn't quite die. That covers the combos I wanted to talk about for 1v1 situations, so we will move on to our large scale combos. These combos are not necessarily designed to combo a player to death in one go, and are more meant to throw as much damage as possible in a fight, with CCs sprinkled throughout them to hopefully catch anyone who messes up, so your ball can take advantage of it. The first combo is a fully protected super armor combo, which means if you do it correctly, you will not get CC'd out of it unless you are grabbed. The combo is Cataclysm into Aqua Jail, into Bolide of Destruction, into Magma Bomb, into Barrage of Water, followed by Magical Evasion for repositioning, into Cataclysm, into Aqua Jail. And from that point, your cooldowns are kind of messed up a bit, so you can either just teleport out and regroup, or if you want to stay in, you can use any other skills that are off cooldown to try to throw more damage. The next combo for large scale is also fully protected, however, it is not all in super armor and has some forward guard portions. What this means is you have to be a little more careful when using it and position correctly to avoid getting caught out of the forward guard gaps. The combo is Hellfire to engage, followed by Bolide of Destruction, into Magma Bomb, into Barrage of Water, into Cataclysm, followed by Aqua Jail, and then Magical Evasion, which is used to reposition yourself if needed for the Chilling Wave, which is a forward guard, followed by Hellfire, followed by Magma Bomb, into Cataclysm, and then Aqua Jail again. One thing to note for all four of these combos is you can cancel basically any skill in these combos into Elementalization at any point. Elementalization is one of your movement or escape skills. You would do this mainly to avoid getting caught mid-combo and either continue comboing afterwards or try to run away after getting out. Now that all of the setup and basic knowledge for Awakening Wizard has been covered, we can start going over the strategies, tips, and tricks and how to actually play the class. Speaking in general terms, at a basic level, Awakening Wizard is essentially a hand grenade. You pull the pin, throw yourself into the enemy ball, and literally explode, taking as many people with you as you can. In other words, if you are just starting out, all you should be focusing on is getting in the fight, throw as much damage as possible. Your main goal while doing this is to not die while crowd controlled. You should only ever die while standing up and still throwing skills out. Once you succeed in doing this consistently, you can move on to the specifics, which is positioning and being more selective with when to use skills. The first thing I wanted to discuss is pre-buffs. These are skills you want to cast just before getting in a fight to increase your effectiveness. And for Awakened Wizard, the pre-buffs are very simple and consist of 2 skills. They are Speed Spell and Magical Shield. Speed Spell is a skill used only through your hotbar that increases your casting speed and movement speed, which enables some unique combos, increases your DPS, and allows you to get into position quickly. Magical Shield is a main hand skill which can be flowed into from Speed Spell by pressing Q during the Speed Spell animation. It increases all of your CC resistances by 30% and reduces all damage you receive by 25% for the duration, which is huge. The trade-off, however, is the damage it absorbs is taken from your mana pool instead of your health pool. This is where the Mind Focus Lightstone set I mentioned earlier comes in handy. Mind Focus gives you 700 extra maximum mana, which is enough to allow your mana to last just about as long as your health bar does with Magic Shield up. Without this extra MP, your mana would run out long before your health bar does, leaving you a sitting duck in a fight as you will not be able to cast skills. To show you how effective this reduction is, I have a couple examples. Up first is me getting hit by a single skill with and without Magic Shield, and as you can see, the difference in HP is quite noticeable, with me taking 798 less damage with the skill active. Up next is an example of me getting comboed with and without the skill active. Without it, I die long before the combo ends, and with it, I actually survive the combo. This just goes to show you how good this skill is. I also wanted to talk briefly about your wizard summons. You want to have them active at all times because they greatly increase the damage you deal. In addition, you can try to keep the summon in between yourself and your opponents so that they have a harder time hitting you with their abilities, as they will target the pet or the summon instead of you. And one thing most people don't know about Wizard Summon is it actually has an active skill you can command it use, similar to how a tamer would with their dog. If you look at your summon skills, you can see that it says press right mouse to command the summon to use their special attack. Both summons have this listed in their skill description, and on both, you can see that it states this special attack will stiff the target on hit, and after the special attack, it will auto-activate their flows immediately afterwards to deal damage. This stiff can be used as a catch, but it is better used as a way to save yourself if you feel like you're going to get caught by someone. This is because the second you initiate the brief animation of the skill, the summon will cast it regardless of what is happening to your character. This means if you get CC'd, the summon will still throw the skill out, which may interrupt whoever caught you. I do have an example of this you can see on screen where I get CC'd by a ninja who immediately gets interrupted out of his combo by my pet, which would allow me to get away. Another general tip for Awakened Wizard has to do with using Hellfire properly. Hellfire is a skill that starts with a dash, which when it hits a player will throw out damage. If you do not hit anything with the dash, you will not throw the rest of the skill, which leaves you extremely vulnerable. When first learning Awakened Wizard, it would be fairly common for me to misjudge the range of Hellfire and stop an inch away from my target's face unprotected and get killed. The way around this is to press left mouse button during the dash, which will force the actual damage part of the skill to go off. You can see how this looks on screen, and this is a good habit to get in early as possible. Even if you know you're in range to use Hellfire, you should always press left mouse just in case you miss or in case the target gets out of the way. Make sure you always press left mouse button at the end of the dash so you get as much movement out of it as possible as well. The last topic before I get into specific PvP situations is mouse moving with Wizard. If you don't know what that is, mouse moving is when you bring your cursor up in game by pressing left control and clicking on the ground to move your character. This can also be done during certain skills to change the direction they are casted or aimed at. Awakening Wizard had 3 skills that are worth mouse moving. They are Teleport, Chilling Wave, and Rain of Fire. Mouse moving Teleport is probably the strongest option of the three. When using Teleport against a skilled player, they will usually have an easy time chasing you after you use it. This is because when you cast it, your character will always face in the direction you're going to move if you use this skill normally. This tells your opponent where you are going and they will start chasing you before you even start moving. This gives you less breathing room when kiting and just is bad in general. If you mouse move it, however, you will not face the direction you actually move. As you can see on screen, I face the direction of the initial cast, but have control to go wherever I want when moving. You can do things like teleporting backwards, teleporting in place, or even directly on top of your opponent by doing this. Learning to mouse move teleport is extremely useful and highly recommended. Chilling Wave, when mouse moved, allows you to rotate the skill to face any direction you want while the skill is going off. This allows you to make sure your forward guard is always facing the threat, making it harder to catch you during it. And Rain of Fire essentially gains the same advantage of chilling. You can also rotate the skill however you want during it to make sure you don't get hit in the back and get caught. With general knowledge out of the way, I'm going to go over strategies to use in 1v1, small scale, and large scale PvP. We will start by talking about 1v1 PvP, which is probably Awakening Wizard's weakest aspect. Your catches in 1v1 are going to mainly consist of your grab, Earthquake, which is a cancelable multi-hit stiff, Hellfire, and Cataclysm. Besides these, the other catches you can use are essentially any of your main hand skills that have a CC on it. However, your main hand skills are much more niche and harder to find time to use due to their usually long animation and lack of protection. If you do see an opening though, do not be afraid to use them. I did want to show an example of an Earthquake catch because people seem to not trust me on that one, so I wanted to show one of my Earthquake catches in this video. You can see that in this clip, my opponent screwed up their super armor rotation and got caught by the stiff on Earthquake, and I saw this and immediately canceled into Hellfire, which allowed me to combo and get the kill. This hopefully proves how useful Earthquake is. The remaining CCs in your kit, which are Bolide and Water Sphere, are much better saved for a re-CC and a combo, so try your best not to use them outside of a combo situation if you can. Another important thing to mention in 1v1 situations is the importance of Retardando, which puts a 50% attack speed, casting speed, and movement speed slow on your target. This is insanely powerful, as getting slowed by that amount is usually a death sentence in the current state of the game. Here's an example of an awakened hash, which normally can easily run away and get out of sticky situations. I see an opening and use Retardando, which causes him to try to run away, and even on Awakening Wizard, which is one of the slower classes, I can still keep up with him and finish the kill. It can also make it impossible for classes to combo you correctly because they will be too slow to get the correct skills off in a quick enough fashion. If you at all see an opportunity to use Retardando, I highly recommend doing it, as it is completely game winning if you do it. The hardest part about 1v1 is dealing with grab classes, as Awakening Wizard has very few movement options and as a result is extremely vulnerable to grabs. When fighting a grab class, the strategy to follow is to simply never go in. You always wait for the opponent to come to you, and the second you see them get in grab range, you teleport or elementalization out. Once you are out, if both of these movement skills are still on cooldown, you should try to magical evasion or sprint away to buy time for one of your movement skills to be back up. You keep repeating this while throwing what catches you can safely at the opponent until you see them try to use their grab. You see their animation for it happen. Once you see that grab animation whiff, you can start going aggressive, as they have just used their best win condition and are much more vulnerable to your damage and super armor trading. While I'm on the topic of grabs, let's talk about how to use your own grab in 1v1, as how to use it doesn't really change in the other forms of PvP. The best way to use your grab is to use it out of a super armor or a forward guard. You simply wait for someone to engage on you or get within range, and if you see them throw any skill that doesn't have a crowd control on it, you press the grab button to cancel out of whatever protected skill you were using. Most of your protected skills can be quickly canceled into the grab. This makes successfully grabbing with Wizard very much a knowledge check, as you will need to know the other class's skills so that you know which skills are safe and unsafe to try to challenge. You can see an example of this on screen where I just linger my protections until I see a skill with no CC on it, at which point I press the grab button, which results in a kill. And another way to use your grab besides this is to grab immediately after teleporting. This is a bit more tricky because you have to be either very good at judging distance or be an expert at mouse moving so you can land right next to the target of the grab every time. You also, if you choose to teleport in the grab, give up your strongest movement option, however. And by doing so, it leaves you vulnerable to getting grabbed yourself or dove heavily because you don't have a good way to get out. The main thing to take away from this is you can't just mindlessly press grab unlike some other classes, because Wizard has a long, about 0.5 second startup animation on the grab, which is a massive gap that can easily be taken advantage of. That's the end of strategy in 1v1, and with 1v1 strategy out of the way, we can move on to how to play in small scale. If you don't know what small scale is, that is any form of PvP that has teams of 2 to 3 players. This type of PvP in terms of strategy isn't all that different from 1v1. All of the catches you use are the same, and the way you play against grabs and use your grab are the same. However, there are 3 main differences. First is that you have to be much more aware of your surroundings. You need to use that awareness to know how hard to commit on a target. If you get someone in a combo, but see a peel coming, it's a much better idea to disengage and try to get that kill again later. The second difference is that the large scale combos start to come into play, and you need to know when to super armor trade with those combos or choose to risk the less protected 1v1 combos, which will give you higher damage on a catch to score a kill. The last difference is you should be more willing to use your main hand skills now. The fact that there are other players who can distract the other team and make space for you allows you to be extremely annoying with your ranged main hand abilities. A lot of these abilities have CCs or debuffs or slows on them, making you a complete menace if you get left alone. Another quick tip to mention is that Retardando is also still extremely game winning if you can land it. And in addition, which I didn't mention before, Retardando is actually an AoE. So if the enemy team is grouped up tight enough, you can actually slow all of them at the same time, and slowing an entire team by that much is extremely strong. That covers the strategy of small scale. And the last type of PvP, which is probably going to be the largest segment, is large scale. And that is because this is where Wizard really shines and is probably the hardest thing to learn out of all of them. And if you don't know what large scale is, it is any form of PvP that involves teams of more than 3 players. This is most commonly Node War, Siege, and Guild League. And in large scale, your priorities shift from looking for catches to trying to throw out just as much damage as possible into the enemy ball without getting caught yourself. Getting a catch is still nice. You should not, however, chase hard after a catch, as it can put you out of position and get you killed very easily. The only catch you should ever chase after in large scale is one that happens to be close enough for you to go on without overextending. This usually means if the catch is within the range of magical evasion or a single teleport, not your double teleport. Never commit more than 1 movement skill to a catch, or you will find yourself out of position and killed very quickly. First up, for large scale, I wanted to go over your best engaged skills. These are the first skills you cast during a dive. And first up is Meteor, which is an extremely long range skill with a huge AoE and CCs throughout the entire animation. This skill can be absolutely ridiculous as a catch, as you might see on screen. Your other main engaged skill is Cataclysm, which is a solid super armor skill with debuffs on it to make your team hit the enemies harder. You can also use Hellfire as an engage, but you need to be a bit more careful with it since it's only a forward guard. You should only really use Hellfire if you know your back is to a wall, or if you are on the edge of the ball fight so there are not really many people behind you. Now you've heard about all of this engaging stuff, but how do you engage? And that brings us to our next topic, how to engage correctly. Knowing how to engage correctly on Awakening Wizard is extremely important as you have very limited mobility. And if you aren't standing in the right spot at the right time, it is very hard to get out. The simplest way to explain this is that you should only ever engage on the side or back of the enemy ball. You never want to go head on straight into the middle of an enemy ball. The only time that ever works is if you have protected area up, or if you outgear the enemy extremely heavily to where it doesn't matter. As an Awakened Wizard, you mainly want to stay on the edges of the fight and never be in the thick of it. This is where the class will shine best. And I'm going to go over a few examples of good engaging and positioning so you can kind of see how it looks in action. First is an example where my guild and the enemy guild are on either side of a choke. You can immediately see that I am starting off to the side in preparation for the fight that is about to happen. You should take note of this, as in all of these examples, once I have shy buffs and the ball is ready to go, I always make my way over to the left or right side of the ball, so I don't take the brunt of a hit if we get dove. In this case, we did get dove, and since I'm on the side of the fight, I survived the initial attack and have the option to fight on the flank or go to our back line if they need help. The main thing to take away from this example is once you feed your BSR and get all buffed up and your ball is waiting for the next shot call or idling, it's always best to be closer to the edge of the ball. This puts you in the best position to fight on the outskirts of a fight, which is, as I said, where you shine best. The next example is an example of us engaging on a ball, and in this situation, the shot caller was telling us all to group up and started moving us towards the next fight. You can see, while the rest of the ball was getting ready, I made my way already to the edge of the ball and got in a good flanking position while paying attention to the minimap, which is extremely important, and I will talk about that later. And once I heard the call to dive, I immediately engaged on their backline, which is, as you can see, extremely devastating if an Awakening Wizard can get on the backline. You always want to engage on the edge of the enemy ball and make your way inward if protected area isn't active. Another thing to keep in mind for good positioning is using terrain to your advantage. The short version of what you're going to see here is it is extremely powerful to have your back to a wall or any obstruction. Doing this will make you unbelievably tanky, as the damage multiplier on a back attack is not to be taken lightly, and you also reduce the amount of people that can hit you at once. In this next example, you can see my guild is in a stalemate with who we are currently fighting. I see in the middle of the two guilds is an outcropping of rocks, and I take advantage of this and hide behind them, trying to keep my back to the wall. This allows me to throw damage and CCs right where the two balls are clashing. If they want to actually get at me, they have to push past our front line, which is very difficult in this situation. This is an extremely good example of how to use terrain correctly. The next example of using terrain starts with me once again sitting off to the side of the ball, waiting for the fight. Shot caller calls to go in, so once again I engage. After being in the fight for some time, I take a lot of damage. I notice I am close to a rock I can use for protection. So I immediately elementalization backwards to place myself against the wall, allowing me to survive long enough to get out. This is another good example on how to use terrain to your advantage. Another quick thing that I wanted to talk about, which I briefly mentioned earlier, is situational awareness, which is extremely important for Awakening Wizard. You always want to be glancing at your minimap to see the positions of allies and enemies in your vicinity. If you remember to do this, it can save your life more than once. Most rat classes in the game have so much mobility, they can sometimes be on top of you before you even have time to see them render. The minimap will mark them even if they are far away and out of render distance, giving you plenty of time to react, so make sure you always glance at it. Protected area is also a skill we need to discuss when it comes to large scale, and honestly all forms of PvP in general. This includes small scale and 1v1. This skill is meta defining, and if you don't know what it does, it reduces damage taken for you and 10 allies by 50% for 8 seconds. This is a game winning skill if used correctly. Most of the time in an organized fight, your shot caller will call for you to use protected area. So if you have a skilled shot caller who can track the cooldown of PA very well, you should try to save it for their calls. It is, however, perfectly fine to use protected area based on your own judgment. If the caller is bad at tracking it, or if you see a situation you know would be massive if you used it, do not hesitate to use protected area. In addition, try not to use protected area just for yourself. You always want to try to be near allies when you cast this to increase its effectiveness. If you at all doubt how strong this skill is because of how much damage there currently is in the game, I have a clip here of my guild grouping for a push through a choke. The caller calls for PA, I cast it, dive forward straight into the enemy ball, and if you remember, you should never engage in this way on Awakening Wizard. This is a bad idea. But because I have protected area, this is one of the few times where I know I can get away with it. So I engage and basically get caught immediately because I chose to engage with the risky skill Hellfire, get thrown on the floor, and you can see I'm able to tank damage from the entire enemy ball while CC'd for like a couple seconds, and then I V out to save myself. Without PA, I can promise you I would have died in about a 1/10 of a second there if it wasn't active. This skill can let you get away with doing many things others just can't get away with, so make sure you take advantage of it. Another skill integral to large scales is all of your healing skills. Needless to say, in large scale, you should only ever have Sage's Light as your first RABAM skill selection. You should always be glancing at health bars to see who needs to be topped off with any of your heals. Doing this will only speed up how quickly your ball can be ready for a fight. And unfortunately, sacrificing yourself for a heal is also a very common thing you will have to accept and come to terms with. This mainly occurs with your strongest heal, Sage's Light. Because Sage's Light goes off so fast, even if you get caught out of it, the heal will usually, at the very least, partially go off. And in a large fight, when it comes to you living or making sure up to 10 allies around you live instead, the correct choice is clear. You should always sacrifice yourself in that situation. So if you are in a fight and notice you can save several teammates at the risk of your own safety, it's usually worth it. Also, in a fight, if the shot caller says to heal, it's best just to use Sage's Light when he says to, despite the bad situation it may put you in. Losing one player to keep 10 players alive is always a good decision. It isn't fun to do this, but it's one of the responsibilities we have as Awakening Wizards. And the last thing I wanted to touch on when it comes to PvP was just a little trick you can use on Awakening Wizard to give you some more options for good positioning. And that is that Wizard can actually fall from any height without going into a falling animation. You'll still take the falling damage from this, but it will allow you to immediately go into protection upon landing instead of being locked in the landing animation, enabling you to surprise enemies from above and throw damage instantaneously. The way this works is very simple. You magical evasion off of the high ground and just keep spamming magical evasion left and right while you're falling. The game will allow you to magical evasion midair as long as there's no gap between the inputs, which keeps you from going into the falling animation. And as you can see on screen, using this in the correct situations can be extremely devastating. So don't be afraid to use high ground in this way. And with all of that done and gone over, that's basically all I really have to say about Awakening Wizard in PvP. I really hope you guys found the guide useful and at least learned something from it. Just a disclaimer, this guide by no means is a one-stop shop for literally everything Awakening Wizard. I'm sure there were plenty of things that I may have missed or forgotten to mention or just kind of glossed over when I should have gone into more detail. But hopefully you got something out of the guide and at least come out more knowledgeable than you came in. If you guys have any questions or comments or advice for other Wizard players, if I messed anything up or missed any points, please feel free to post in the comments below and help each other out. But thank you guys so much for watching the video and checking it out. This is the longest video I've ever done and the most work I've ever had to put into a video. This video took way longer than I wanted it to make, but I'm glad it's finally done. And as always, if you guys enjoy this content, please subscribe, and you can also check me out over on Twitch at twitch.tv/bluesky900 if you have any questions about this guide or any other video I've made or Awakening Wizard in general, or if you just want to hang out and like see a cool entertaining stream, please go over there and check me out. I'd really appreciate it. But as always, thanks for watching, guys, and I will catch you in the next video.